Hi everyone, this is Erica from Gokce Capital. Today we're going to discuss how to value vacant land and also how not to. And I also quickly want to say that today's presentation has contributions from Mike Marshall of the Toulouse Property Group. So very quickly, if you're not familiar with appraisal standards, there are three widely accepted ways to value any kind of real estate. The first is the income approach. As the name suggests, it's used mainly for income generating property. And at a high level, you look at the operating income and you divide that by the cap rate to get the valuation. There's also the cost approach, and this is used for buildings that may not generate much income, things like churches, schools, other kinds of uses that don't have an income stream. And in this approach, you look at the estimated replacement cost of the building minus depreciation plus the land. Now, as you can probably tell, these first two approaches are not ideal for vacant land. So that leaves us with the sales comparison approach. And it is, as the name suggests, you look at similar recently sold property in the same area and then you apply adjustments. Now, appraisers will use sold properties only, and that is, of course, the best kind of comparable to get. But with vacant land, we often have a problem of not having enough comparables. So sometimes when we're doing our own valuation, we do have to use listed properties as well. So the first step is to select your comparables. You do want to be careful here because these comparables need to be as similar as possible. So that means they're in the same location. And with location, you do have to be very careful. As we all know, there can be a huge difference between properties, even a mile or so from each other. You also want to make sure they're similar size, and to the greatest extent possible, they have similar characteristics. Now, again, with vacant land, it can be very hard to find good comparables. So you take what you can get and just try to make sure they are as similar as possible. And to the greatest extent possible, you also want to rely only on sold data. Then you're going to make adjustments as needed to try and value the property you're looking at. Now, another way of thinking about this is you get your comparables, you lay them out in a spreadsheet, and you have a range of the highest value to the lowest value per acre. And that range gives you a good benchmark on how usability affects price. So you'd say the highest valued property is a very useful property. The lowest valued is essentially unusable property or less usable property. So once you have your range of comparables, you think about adjustments and try to figure out within that range, where your property is most likely to fall. And I'm going to go over some of the most important things to consider, but this is not an exhaustive list. There are always other things that you can look at. But some of the key items include, well, first and foremost, access. And I go over access in a few other videos, so I'll briefly touch on it here. But first, can you even get to the property? Does it have physical access? If you can't get there, it's not going to be very useful generally. But you also want to look at legal access, because in many places or in many jurisdictions, you're not going to be able to pull a building permit if you don't have legal access. Again, I have other videos where I go into what legal access actually means, so you may want to check those out if you're curious about legal access. But that's the first thing you want to look at, access. Then you can also look at improvements on the lot and also dig into buildability, so what you can actually put on the property. Now with improvements, these are things like a driveway, if there's an existing well or septic system. Sometimes you'll see properties that have a shed or a hunting blind, or maybe an old cabin. Even some of these older, more worn out properties can add some value to the lot. But it's also not just about a physical structure. There could also be an area that's already been cleared and graded and made ready for building. That would be something that would increase the value of the lot. So if you know you have access and you've taken a look at any potential improvements on the lot, then you're really going to dig into buildability. And I will say, sometimes you don't care about buildability. Maybe you're just purchasing the lot for recreational purposes. So you may not be as interested in doing a ton of due diligence on buildability, but whether it's buildable or not still affects its value. So if you're curious about, or if you really want to make sure you're getting a good price, you're going to want to know whether the lot is actually buildable and how easy it would be to build on it. So the first thing when it comes to buildability is zoning. I go into zoning in some of my other videos as well, but broadly speaking, this is allowable uses. So what kind of uses the county will allow you to put on the lot. Also, you want to take a look at the development standards that are written into the zoning code. These are things like setbacks and minimum lot size that may affect where you can build on the lot and how much buildable space there actually is. And you also want to take a look at the slope, because many jurisdictions will have regulations around hillside construction. So you'll want to know how the slope affects buildability and how what zoning is going to restrict, or how zoning is going to restrict development on a hillside. Also, of course, steep slope probably means it's going to be more expensive to build. You also want to take a look at hazard zones. The biggest hazard zone, or most common one, is the special flood hazard area. You can find that on FEMA maps. Again, I go over this in some other videos in more detail if you wanted to look at those. But there are also, in certain counties, fire zones. You can usually find these in the county GIS map, but you can also give the county a call, and the local planning department will usually be able to point out whether there is a fire zone. And then if you're in California, you also need to think about seismic zones. And finally, there are other environmental issues. Some of these are not so much hazard zones, but they're things you want to think about. So is there a wetland on the property? Is there an environmental cleanup site nearby? Are there endangered species? Are there protected trees? All of these things can affect how easy it is to build on the property. And finally, this is a big one, and it's sometimes missed by first-time land investors and first-time land buyers, but is the property actually a legal lot? Now, when you're doing your research on legal access, this will probably come up, but if it doesn't, you're going to want to look into it on its own. And the basic question is, was the lot legally subdivided? Many counties and cities have a subdivision law, so they have certain regulations you need to comply with if you are going to subdivide a lot. Now, you will see with many rural lots that there are properties that were subdivided before the subdivision law was created in that jurisdiction. So 30 or 40 years ago, 50 years ago, people used to be able to subdivide just by deed. They didn't have to go through any kind of permitting process, and they didn't need to comply with any kind of regulations. So if you're looking at a property and it wasn't legally subdivided, the next question you want to ask is, was it subdivided before the subdivision law came into effect? Usually a property will be grandfathered in if it was created before the law. If, however, it was not legally subdivided and it was created after the subdivision law, you will need to check what all the subdivision requirements are, because the property will need to be made to comply with all of those requirements if you wanted to pull a building permit. So this gets into some more complicated issues. The easiest way to start to look into this is just to give the county a call and talk to them about the history of the property when it was subdivided and whether it was done legally. Usually they can help you out with this and give you the information you need. And so with those general items, you can get at least a gut sense of where your property is going to fall within the range of comps that you have. Unfortunately, there is no scientific way to say this property is definitely valued at X amount. But the more research you do, the more confident you can feel that you are valuing the property more or less in the correct ballpark, or in the general ballpark. And I also do want to leave you with a little bit of information on how not to value land. And I bring this up because it's very common. Often hear people who are purchasing properties refer to the county assessed value. I'll say this is not a good value to use as a benchmark for the property's market value. And why is that? Well, first of all, county data can often have a lot of errors in it. There are a number of reasons why this may be, but one main reason is people don't always report what's going on with the property if they can get away with not updating the county on improvements added or changes made to the property. They may try to get away with it so that their taxes don't go up. There are other reasons that there are errors, just due to general human error, time lags, things like that. So it's important to keep in mind that the county data can have errors. But another big reason why the county assessed value is not a good indication of market value is that the assessed value often lags current market value. So even in counties where the county assessor tries to, or does a good job at trying to tag assessed value to market value, the assessment process usually happens once a year on a certain cycle. So the valuation could be up to a year behind by the time that you're looking at buying the property. The third reason the assessed value is often not a good benchmark is because in many counties, the assessed value doesn't actually track market value in a meaningful way, and this is often because of local regulations that could cap annual increases or decreases. And sometimes the assessed value isn't even tied to local market comps. It's tied to the last sales price on that particular property. So that could mean the property is still based on the property assessed value is still based on a sale that happened 15, 20, 30 years ago. So for all of these reasons, the county assessed value is not a great way to determine the actual market value of your property. There are always exceptions, of course. So that's it for our brief introduction on how to value land. I want to give a shout out to Mike Marshall. He is a zoning and development expert with over 12 years in the field of land use and zoning. He is really a great resource on all questions or topics around zoning and development and land use. And you can check him out at his Facebook group, Faster Land Sellers, and at his website, Tolusa Property Group. And I'll have the links in the description to this video. Also, if you're not familiar with us, we are Gokce Capital. We buy and sell vacant land. You can find our website at gokcecapital.com. You can also find all our listings at gokcecapital.com/listings. And when you go to our website, you may want to take a look at our promotions. We do love giveaways. Our most popular is our free land giveaway. So please don't hesitate to reach out. You can email, call, or text at any time, or leave a comment on this video. So thank you for listening, and more to come.